Here's what you can do in order to improve battery life on a Motorola Moto G56. So first of all, we're gonna go to settings and we're gonna start with the battery settings because these are essentials when we are talking about the battery life improvement and preventing quick battery aging. So first I can tell you about the battery saver, which of course allows you to slow down the draining of the battery. However, it is not really necessary to use it all the time, only in situations where you are in a situation where you need to keep the battery alive for as long as possible. For example, you have 35% left, but you need to make sure that the battery can last as long as possible, so it is recommended to turn it on. You can also find the battery saver in the control center over here somewhere. So use it in terms when you want to prevent dying battery in a given moment. Now, besides that, we also have this option, manage background apps. So here you can decide which apps should not be allowed to be used in the background. This can be used especially for apps that are draining the battery in the background when they are often running in the background and they use battery a lot. So you should consider preventing them to be used in the background by simply choosing not allow. You can also just keep them in keep the option for each app to be set to smart use, so the phone can decide by itself. However, if you know that there is an app that is running in the background all the time on your phone and it drains the battery, then you can just manually prevent that from happening. Besides that, we have two options that limit battery charging to 80%. That is the optimized charging and the overcharge protection. Overcharge protection is pretty simple, and it means that when we are charging our phone, we will be able to charge it only to 80%, and that's all. The reason why it is exactly 80% is pretty simple. Modern smartphone batteries, they are built in such a way that the most optimal way to use them is to keep them between 20 and 80%, which means that we should start charging our phone at 20% and stop charging at 80%. This is when they are most optimized. However, of course, I know that this can be a little bit inconvenient, so you don't really have to use it if you don't want to, but of course it is recommended to do so if you want to prevent battery aging or slow down actually the battery aging as much as possible, because it is impossible to stop battery aging. This is just the nature of batteries. And the second option that I mentioned was optimized charging, which is kind of similar to the previous one, but in this case the phone decides by itself when the battery should stop charging when it reaches 80%. And this is especially useful if you have charging pattern. That is, if you always charge your phone, for example, at night, let's say. So if you always charge your phone at the same time of the day, then you can turn this option on, let the phone learn the charging pattern, and after some time the phone will stop charging at 80%. But the difference between this option and the other one is that the phone, based on the charging pattern, can turn back on charging of the phone so that the battery can be charged back to 100%. So it will keep at 80% for some time until the phone knows that you will unplug the charger soon, like in 1 hour beforehand or something like that, as we can read over here. Alright, so enough with that. There is also adaptive battery, which is enabled by default, so I assume that I have to really explain it. If it's enabled, then just keep it that way. It is, of course, recommended to keep it on. Alright, but besides battery, there are some other stuff that can be disabled or enabled in order to prevent battery draining. So, for example, we can go to display settings, where we can find most of these things that can drain battery. For example, the adaptive brightness. If you turn it on, then of course the brightness of the screen will adjust based on the lighting of the environment. So if it's light outside, then the screen will light up. But if it's dark, if you are, for example, in bed with lights off, then the screen will turn down, it will become darker, it will dim itself, so you can use it. Essentially, if you use high brightness level for most of the time, then the battery will be drained quicker. Now, besides that, there is dark theme, which can also help you save a battery a little bit. If you use dark theme, then it can save the battery. But if you don't like the dark theme, then I can recommend you trying out the schedule option, which allows you to automate dark theme. Based on the selected time of the day, the dark theme can be automatically enabled or disabled. Besides that, we have display refresh rate. If you use smart and balanced or hyper smooth, then the phone can use up to 120 Hz of display refresh rate. However, the battery consumption is the highest when the phone uses that. So of course, in order to save the battery, we can switch to efficiency first, but of course, as a drawback, we have only 60 Hz of display refresh rate, which can be quite, maybe not annoying, but well, I can understand why you might not want to use it. And to be honest, I wouldn't use it by myself. I'm just, well, mentioning that it is possible to save the battery by using 60 Hz instead of 120. And let's see if is there anything else. I think in the display setting, that's all that we have. There is also one more thing in the home and lock screen. More precisely, if we go to the lock screen, you should be able to find sleep display, which is always on display, which also uses the battery, which also increases the battery consumption. So if you do not really use always on display on this phone, then I can suggest you turning it off. Now, last but not least, there is a small setting that we can find, I believe, in location, but I just have to make sure. Let's go to location services. Yeah, and over here we have two options that can be disabled: Wi-Fi scanning and Bluetooth scanning. In my case, Bluetooth scanning is already disabled, but Wi-Fi scanning is on. And these are small settings that can actually have a little bit of impact on the battery consumption. We don't really need to have these options enabled all the time. When it is required to use these features, then of course the phone will tell you about it, so you can just simply agree to that, and then the phone can turn on, for example, Wi-Fi scanning or Bluetooth scanning. However, we don't have to use it all the time, so you can just turn it off and leave it at that. If at some point the phone will ask you to turn it on, then you can do that, but remember to turn it off later on as well in order to save the battery. And that is essentially it in terms of the settings. Of course, keep in mind that in order to improve the battery life, to have the battery for as long as possible, essentially, to make the battery last as long as possible during or in one charge, then you can also turn off some other features like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, mobile data, or NFC, as we don't need to have them enabled all the time, so you can just keep them on when you actually need them. If you are outside of your home and you don't have Wi-Fi, there is no reason to keep the Wi-Fi on, so you can tap over here in order to turn it off. The same thing, of course, can be said about Bluetooth. If you don't have any Bluetooth device connected right now to your phone, then there is no need to keep Bluetooth on, so you can remember about that. Alright, so I think these are all tips that I wanted to mention that can help you improve battery life on this phone. Thanks for watching, leave a like and subscribe.